A year after battling drought, Nebraska farmers face severe weather. More on that in just a moment. You're watching NTV's Grow, a program that takes a look at the headlines in agriculture and goes deeper. Later in the show, we'll have an interview looking at the differences between corporate and family farming. And we will continue the debate over genetically modified crops. This week, protesters take to the streets against seed giant Monsanto. Organizers of the March Against Monsanto say they're calling attention to what they see as dangers posed by genetically modified food and the companies that produce it. Genetically modified plants are grown from seeds engineered to resist insecticides and herbicides and add nutritional benefits and improve crop yields. However, some believe they can lead to health problems and harm the environment. Opponents have pushed for mandatory labeling through the federal government, and many scientists say the technology is safe. As of late, Nebraska farmers have battled extreme weather, this coming off unprecedented drought. Farmers say crops would have been devastated if not for GMOs.
But what happens is we stick these 3 probes in the ground.
Mining for data, Nebraska farmers like Jeff Ruth dig deep to learn all they can so they can better manage their farms with less water and less fertilizer.
To grow the most that we can possibly produce with using the least amount of resources.
This year, the Ruths are using less than 6 ounces of pesticides to cover an entire acre.
Which is, less than half of a pop can over the course of a whole acre, which is the size of a football field.
That's because of crops designed to withstand drought and insects.
The technology allows us to have plants that are more water efficient, they're resistant to pests. It's just a tremendous improvement.
They say genetically modified crops helped them overcome the worst drought in a half-century.
Last year would have been a disaster, in my opinion, if we hadn't had the seed technology that we have.
Many oppose GMOs, blaming them for cancer and birth defects. Opponents target Monsanto as public enemy #1, with images of workers in hazmat suits spreading chemicals on farms. This week saw the social media-driven March Against Monsanto.
In the last 3 years, I have lost more friends. They died from illnesses, cancer.
Despite those images, family farmers like the Ruths say improvements in seed technology benefit everyone.
Without GMO and without the ability to grow that crop while using less water, we would have seen, I personally believe, panic in the streets, because we would have seen high food prices. We would have seen a complete depletion of our reserves in the corn and soybean sector.
Recent days have also brought an outbreak of twisters. Many central Nebraskans say they're fortunate that the damage wasn't worse.
It got kind of nasty for a little bit.
Tornadoes left a 10-mile path of destruction through York County, overturning pivots and denting grain bins. Despite reports of up to a dozen twisters, Larry Heine feels fortunate.
Could have been a lot worse. Nobody got hurt.
This farmer was racing home in his pickup and got in the garage just in time.
Lawn chair came flying off the deck. I decided I'd probably just stay there.
Photos leave no doubt this was a tornado. The only trouble is figuring out how many hit. Meteorologists from the National Weather Service were out in the field to determine that and rate the strength, likely an EF1.
Most of the damage has been done to center pivots, a few Butler-type buildings, and then a fair amount of tree damage.
A mile or so to the west, and it could have hit York's busy I-80 interchange. So to hit a few farms is a relief to many.
If it hit your farmstead, and you got to do all the cleanup, you don't feel so lucky, but thank goodness nobody was seriously injured.
Larry Heine had 2 immediate concerns: getting soybeans from a damaged bin to the elevator and getting his irrigation system back up.
Quite a problem even just to get a new pivot put up and then have these damaged ones. I don't know how that'll work.
As long as it rains, he can live without his pivots, in stark contrast to last summer.
Fighting drought and starting pivots, and the dust was a-blowing. Seems like every year is a little bit different. You deal with a different problem.
As far as that crop goes, UNL extension educators tell us it's early enough that it should recover just fine. Clay County was also hit hard this week, with tornadoes touching down near Edgar. Hours after a Memorial Day gathering with friends at this farm, a violent storm struck, destroying a 100-year-old barn as Lynn Howard watched.
And I kept seeing pieces of my buildings going by the window. So I texted my friend Daryl, and I said, I asked him, I don't know what to do, and he said, find shelter.
Across the town of Edgar, trees and power lines were down, and in nearby fields, countless pivots were overturned. The roof to the Sugar Shack Candle Company was damaged, and large grain bins were smashed in a tornado rated an EF2. China's largest meat processor announces a big-time deal, a $4.7 billion acquisition of Smithfield Foods. Smithfield is the world's largest pork producer, selling products under brand names like Armour and Farmland. It's the largest corporate acquisition by any U.S. company by a Chinese company. Smithfield operates 3 plants in Nebraska, in Omaha, Lincoln, and Crete. No Smithfield plants would close under the agreement. The Senate has approved an amendment that would limit the amount of government subsidies the wealthiest farmers could receive when purchasing crop insurance. The amendment is the biggest victory so far for critics of a massive 5-year farm bill and would reduce the government's share of crop insurance premiums for farmers with adjusted gross incomes of more than $750,000. The proposed bill would cost almost $100 billion a year and includes generous subsidies for the nation's biggest crops. Supporters have deflected other attempts to reduce government help for agriculture, including efforts to trim sugar subsidies and crop insurance. Consumers will soon see labels on their meat telling them where the animal was born, raised, and slaughtered. The USDA previously required country of origin labels on seafood since 2005 and meat and other products since 2009. But new rules now in effect provide more detailed information. Instead of seeing a label that says product of the USA and Canada, shoppers might find one that says born in Canada, raised and slaughtered in the United States. The new labels are meant to bring the U.S. in line with World Trade Organization standards. One of the nation's largest farm co-ops is expanding. The board of directors of Hastings-based CPI approved the purchase of DeWeese Agri-Services, including locations in DeWeese and Oak. The acquisition brings CPI to 39 locations across Nebraska. Officials with the egg companies say the purchase makes sense and helps expand CPI's footprint while tying in nicely with existing locations. Cargill is making a big investment in the community of Holdridge with a $30 million expansion at their grain elevator there. Director of Communications Mark Klein shares some of the details.
Well, there's basically 3 areas. One is to increase unloading speeds, and for our farmer customers, that means they're going to be less time waiting in line to unload their trucks and more time they can spend in the field. We're also going to, add to our storage capacity. And finally, we're going to add rail service there. We're going to put in the capability to have 120-car shuttle trains. Currently, it's a truck operation, but with this rail addition, we're going to be able to reach out to some additional markets like in the U.S. Southwest and the Pacific Northwest, and it's just going to give more markets for area farmers.
That Cargill expansion in Holdridge is expected to be completed by harvest 2014. Well, corporate farms or family farms? Marilyn Barnett is in after the break with more.